So, with that, I want to get to our first speaker, Susan Senator. Susan's an author, blogger, journalist, educator, and mother of 3 sons, the oldest of whom is diagnosed with autism. And through conversation, I found out we come from the same home state because I'm from the Boston area as well, which is where her son's currently living. Considered as the author of several books, Making Peace with Autism and the Autism Mom's Survival Guide, and most recently in all of your packages, all of your folios, is her latest publication, Autism Adulthood, Insights and Creative Strategies for a Fulfilling Life. She's a journalist since 1997 and has published pieces on disability, parenting, and living happily. And she's published those in things such as the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Boston Globe, Exceptional Parent magazine. She has been, I'm guessing, interviewed on NPR Family Fun. And she's been published in Education Week. This senator has appeared as a guest on Today, MSNBC, ABC News, PBS, NPR, so television and radio, and CNN. She's written on the Special Olympics, and that writing took her to the White House in 2006 to a state dinner with another Massachusetts well-known family. She was there with Eunice Kennedy Shriver, and some of you may realize the Kennedys and Kennedy Shrivers have been big supporters. In fact, I think they were founders of Special Olympics, and they continue to support it significantly through a number of ways, including funding some private centers that provide treatment for adults and children with autism. So, Susan Senator.
Thank you. Hi, I'm really happy to be here. Yes, that was a good night, the White House. That was, after that, my life went downhill, but no. It's actually, the point of my talk is that it hasn't gone downhill, and that's kind of the message I want you to either take home for yourselves if you are related to someone with autism, or if you have autism, or if you are running an institution that works to help the community and people with autism. It's really not all downhill. Autism adulthood is not a cliff. There's a lot of kind of bad metaphors that you'll be hearing from people as they approach autism adulthood, and that's kind of what I wanted to tackle in my newest book and in my talk today. So, do I have to point it to this?
No, you shouldn't have to at all. It's not working.
Wait.
No.
Okay, wait. No.
I can always.
I can just tell you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just want to introduce myself, although now I don't need to, but this is kind of a different side of me. I just want you to understand I'm coming from this perspective of an advocate, a parent advocate, but I also ran for school board in my town when my son was just diagnosed, which I'm sure everyone runs out to do as soon as they get an autism diagnosis for their child. They then run for public office. But this is what happened. I had to do that. There were no school programs for him, and he was only 3, and I knew that we needed to get him some kind of special services. My town, Brookline, Mass., thought of as one of the best towns in the country for school systems, had nothing. And so I had to become this person instead of who I might have been, just somebody a lot nicer, more fun. But 25 years of advocacy, also Mad Elephant Mom, that's the other piece, in school meetings, and now in adult teen meetings to figure things out for my son. Probably a lot of you out there, if you're any kind of parent advocate, you know what I'm talking about. You might have to bring down the whole tent sometimes. But I'm also still an optimist, maybe even more so than ever because of my son and his friends, a lot of people I've gotten to know on the spectrum in all this time that I've been doing this. I really feel like the word that all the medical professionals should get rid of is never. So, thank you. When someone says he'll never, just kind of walk out or say, let's just say he's not right now, but we're working on this. So I've always liked to think about this. What makes a successful life? What makes us happy? The same thing applies for our children with autism, for an adult with autism. You have to think about this because this is the life that we get. There's no difference whether you have a diagnosis or not. So in writing the book, I really wanted to kind of figure out what are the aspects of life that people want to know about and need to know about in order to find happiness, given any kind of challenge, but let's say this particular challenge of autism spectrum disorder. Is it about money for you? Employment? Fun? Growth? There's all of these. It can be all of this, it can be just one of this, but you have to just we all know that we have to think about this at some point in our lives. With a child with a disability, you need to think about it as soon as possible. 16 years old is probably, I think, the legal age in most states where you're supposed to, your school team's supposed to be thinking about what will adulthood be like, and you make plans accordingly, but what you really should be doing is thinking about it as soon as you possibly can. Not in terms of necessarily opening up a special needs trust right away or something like that, but get your head around the concept of long life and happy life. And what are the values that you want to pursue or you want to help your loved one with autism pursue? So the realities of post-22, in some states it's 21, but transitioning out of school, little funding, few safety nets, all of this is true. Uncertain paths to follow. There aren't enough role models right now. At least not role models that are widely known. In the autism community, autistic adults, you might know about Temple Grandin, Stephen Shore, John Elder Robeson. I love them all. I know them all. They are not what my son looks like, at least not on the surface. So I wanted to write about and think about, what about all the guys? I say guys very warmly, I mean everyone, I mean women too, but it's just a shorthand. What I have been finding is that it's not so much of a chasm, the leap from childhood to adulthood. It's more of, it's an unknown, but I feel that the darkness that people feel and fear when they think about their autistic child as an adult is really just kind of within, because you're afraid. You're afraid because you don't have a picture and you think that there's no guidance out there. I started seeing it differently though. I started thinking about how with less structure, there's actually more freedom. Right now, we're at the point where we have to be pioneers. But the upside of that is we get to be pioneers. So we're on the forefront right now. Society's beginning to be aware of people with autism, of adults with autism. This is where now it's on us to shape that. And as we were hearing before from James in the video, we have to get out there. If we're on the spectrum, get our guys out there and really start to get the public with it so that they understand that, people with autism, here to stay, have always been here, and now want to be really part of everything. If you've gotten this far into adulthood, you already have the skills. You have the skills to do adulthood if you're a parent, if you're a guardian, a caregiver of someone with autism. You've already envisioned a life, you've already advocated, and you've gotten services for your loved one. None of this is going to be new. It's just that there's less known about what's out there, and each state is different. When I was writing the book, though, I did a significant number of interviews that showed me that there are many similarities state by state. Funding is different, programs are called different things, but it's very valuable to learn from others in other states and get an idea in your head that you can then present to your own team or your own legislator, and you kind of get the idea, you see the idea in this state, and that's how it happens. You can show them this is already working somewhere else. So it's about envisioning, but then pushing that. Like, again, I try to break down adult life essentials. You know, so when I thought about my own son, who's 28 now, and he has some verbal ability. He tests low cognitively, but I don't like to say low functioning or any of that because he functions so well in so many other areas. It's nonsense, low functioning, high functioning, but let's just say in some areas he needs a lot of help, and speaking and communicating and understanding social interaction is one of them. So I think about him when I break down adult life. What does it look like? You need to have a work component, you need fun, you need quiet time. If you're on the spectrum, that's probably true. I know I'm not on the spectrum, probably. I still need quiet time. And we also need community to whatever degree we might need it. It looks different in everybody. So what I thought about was to get into the frame of mind of looking at your adult autistic loved one, or yourself, let's say. How do you go about creating a vision for them? I actually came up with a very obvious idea, which was to just write a resume for my son. Just look at what has he done, you know, in his years in school, for instance. What had he done for the last 10 years, let's say? Any kind of job or chore that he became good at, and basically make a resume just like I'd make it for myself. You know, and it's like how you make your first resume. You know, maybe you put a particular spin on something. But after a while, I actually had a real resume for him. Delivery office cafeteria assistant. Okay, delivery assistant, Meals on Wheels. And it started to really feel real to me. It felt like something I could respect and hold on to. This is what Nat has accomplished, and now what is he going to do? So in my exercise, I wrote down, you know, what you can do for yourself. Just think about the resume components: school, skills, experience, passions, something special. And this sometimes draws a blank with people in the audience where they're wondering, well, what does my kid do? He kind of, you know, he does a lot of flapping and he doesn't talk. So instead of thinking about doesn't talk, you know, or flapping as a bad thing, maybe you want to think about when does he flap? What are the times that he's flapping, and is he happy when he's flapping, or is he not happy? You know, there's understanding what those behaviors mean gives you a real insight into what this person likes and doesn't like. And so that's what we're getting at. I'm trying to get inside the head of my autistic adult loved one and figure out what he might need to have a happy life. Passions. So what many in society call disparagingly stims, self-stimulatory behavior, that's actually a key to that person's passion. It's on us to observe and really kind of try to connect with that person and figure out what that passion is. Okay, so for my son, he would put stuff away obsessively, put stuff away, close a cabinet door, and it can get annoying, but on the other hand, it's great. My kitchen drawers get shut. Because I don't do it, so he must hate living with me because of that. So it's just interesting to think of it that way. Eventually, he became a shopping cart collector in a supermarket. That was his first job that he had for 4 years, putting away shopping carts. It was perfect. Just clean up the parking lot and you don't have to talk to anybody, and, complete win-win. So, it's a concrete example of the annoying stim maybe becoming some kind of badge of honor. Because eventually he did get the Worker of the Year award. He's that good at it. In this quest for figuring out what we're going to do with our lives and how we're going to shape them, it's really important to observe what others do. One thing I want to mention before I go deeply into that is, in this talk, I don't go into living the situation too much. So I'm not going to be talking to you about housing and finding housing. I feel that is something that is so diverse and different. That's very different state to state, but that is definitely something that the library will have as resources and funding streams. It's a good place to start for learning that kind of thing. What I'm concerned with more is kind of a frame of mind that you have in adulthood that would lead to what kind of housing you might be interested in and what kind of daytime pursuits you might be interested in. I focus on the daytime pursuits myself because I feel like where you sleep is important, but what you do during the day is really more what your life is about, okay? Hopefully you have a safe and happy place to rest your head. But what I want to get at today is more, what is your life actually about? Because people don't think that way when they think about people with autism. They don't think about that inner life, but it is there. So one of the steps I take beyond the resume, for instance, is just looking at what others do, asking them, meeting others in this same community and figuring out what they do with their life, with their daytime. Right here, this is a farm that was formed in Pennsylvania. It's 5 autistic adult men and some caregivers, and they grow sunflowers and sell them. But in fact, the 5 guys are actually not even farmers. They just live on the farm. They have their own professions that they've created themselves, which I will talk about in a little bit. The way you find these people to observe, you have to make your community, and you have to know where to find your community. So, aside from delicious candy, you look in places like this, conferences. You go to Special Olympics. Okay, I am their biggest fangirl, but they're honestly one of the best things that ever happened to my family and so many others I know. And if you're thinking to yourself, our Special Olympics isn't that good, find another one, because they're all different, the different chapters. Okay. And I don't get paid by the Shrivers to say that, but I really feel like it's given my son a life, and it's given us a life, because of the people we have met at the sidelines. You find people just like you, or just like your own loved one, watching the games, watching the basketball, watching the swimming, getting really bored. You find a lot of people that you can start chatting up and learning about what to do. As I said, aside from these workshop attendees, everybody who's right here is a potential in-law, a potential friend or support. You need to just find that one person and buy them coffee one day, sit down for an hour with coffee and ask your questions. And then you'll find a few years later, it's going to be you. You're the one that's going to be asked, and you'll have something to say. Other school parents, Facebook, this is something we have nowadays. We had no Facebook, we had no internet or books in our library when Nat was diagnosed. So I talk about having to really be a pioneer. I mean, we had to make everything up as we went along, but you don't have to now. And if you are making stuff up, that's great, because you can share that with other people, because I'm sure that what you've come up with is something someone else needs to know. The last one here, the last point, other people on the spectrum, that's going to be your best form of information. I have learned so much about my own son from friends I've met through places like Autism Support Advocate Autism Self-Advocacy Network, ASAN. Even though those guys could hold a conversation with me and organize a meeting and do all kinds of things that my son Nat can't do, the most amazing thing was to see the common stuff there. Talking to one young man, telling me something or other, I forgot what it was a while ago, and suddenly he stops and just starts flapping. And I was like, oh my God, it really is a spectrum. And I kind of, like, that's what Nat does, and it was amazing making this connection that even though he's high functioning, there they are doing the same thing, and I could ask him, what is that? What are you thinking about when you do that? You know, what does it feel like? And it just blows your mind, and that's how you learn. So that's one of my favorite topics here is current possibilities. What is there that's out there now? Okay, so now most of us know there's traditional day programs, 9 to 3. If you get the waiver money, I'm assuming it's waiver through Medicaid. Okay, yes. Through your Department of Developmental Services, you get a portion that you can spend on a day program where you can do things like Meals on Wheels and perhaps work, recreational activities, things like that, and art or creating things. There's also things like community college. More and more of the universities and colleges are opening their doors to people on the spectrum, and in other ways they always have. People on the spectrum have been college professors and librarians, as we know. I mean, but anyone on the spectrum these days, there's been people I know who are much similar to my son Nat in functioning ability who are going to community colleges. Nat's own day program has a program with a local, it's not even a community college, it's a college nearby where the students go, I think, a few times a week, and they have lunch with other college students. So they're starting there. And it's not academic. It is, however, getting into a college situation, learning how to get something out of a college environment, interact with other students, and have them get to know you. It's really important. Those are first steps. You can find things to do. You can go back to old high school jobs. I have a friend who's done that. His parents advocated for him to go back to the hospital he had been working at when he was a high school student. Post-22, he's back there, and he's doing all sorts of stuff there. He's not getting paid, and, you know, that's not good, and yet I actually don't judge that, because I feel like for some people, it's not about the pay. I know there's a movement out there that everyone should have a job and get paid at least minimum wage, and that is great, but I feel like the more important thing is everyone should have a job or be doing something that makes their life feel worth living. For my son, it is not about the paycheck, not yet. And if it becomes that way, I will push for that, but for now, I'm pushing for something very different. I'm pushing for him to have a good time and to feel like his life is worthwhile. These are the arts, volunteering, and there's cottage industries that are springing up all over the place, which to me was the coolest thing that I learned about when trying to write this book, is the way people are turning their passions into small industries. And it starts with thinking about, again, what you want. I'm just trying to organize how we go into this. Okay, so if your first goal is that you want work, then your daytime pursuit is going to have to be something like a job of some sort. But that might not be what it's about for you. It might be that you're more interested in play. You might not have to work. You might have certain funding and supports. Or you might have a job, and then the thing after the job is the thing that you live for. That a lot of us are like that. You might find you need to build quiet time in. So it's like, there's the life that we kind of have to lead, where we work and we, have our lunch and we do whatever we do during the day. And then there's the piece of, what do we want? How do we define ourselves? What makes your heart sing? That's what you need to think about when you're creating a life. By going through all of these things, looking at obsessions and thinking of it in terms of passions. What is that obsession doing for me? How is that making me productive during the day? What are the person's stims? What are they self-stimming on? What are their activities that they prefer? It's a lot of work in some ways to sort of study a person this way, but if you're an autism parent, you've been doing that all his life. You have the information already. The big thing is to be able to ask. You also need to be able to give yourself a break. That if you can't ask or you can't take it all in one conference, you go to another, you rest. You rest and process. That's just another thing that people don't realize that they can do, that they have to do. You have to really do this stuff at your own pace. So don't get all panicked about, oh, I missed that deadline. It's too late. It's never too late. You can keep going at the pace you're at. You will have to find it your way. When my son was 17, that was when I first started thinking about his adulthood. Because our school system was not on the ball. It was supposed to be 16 or earlier. At 17, I thought to myself, shouldn't I be thinking about what he's going to do? And I got out the phone book and I looked in the blue pages, because there was nothing to Google, there was no computer. And I just called some state agency that looked right, and the person laughed at me and said, it's too soon. So we have to realize that people are going to tell us that kind of thing all the time. They're still going to tell you that it's too soon, but if it feels like it's not true, keep going. But I'm standing here telling you that it wasn't too late, even though we were very late at starting. This is my big theme, which is turning your perseverations into professions and passions, things like that. So the people on, all the items on this list are my role models. These are the people I look to when I think about what else can I get done for Nat? What else does he need in his life? How can I further enrich his life? So I'm going to go through them step by step. This one's probably familiar. This is familiar to some, probably a bunch of people. Rising Tide Carwash, a brother and a dad of an autistic young man created a car wash industry, basically, in Florida. All people on the spectrum work. I mean, it's all autistic labor. They're doing great. But it took a lot of energy and time and love. But if you have that in you, go for it, So this is the kind of thing to a small degree, this is one of the kind of examples of what's happening across the country. If the thing doesn't exist, you create it. This is another one. I think this is close by, but maybe it's Indiana, so. This is a great guy. Jeff Huffman has a son with Down syndrome. Jeff was just not satisfied with how the world saw his son, who I think of as, he calls him the dude on Twitter. I don't actually know his real name, but he figured out what his son would do well in, and he created this partnering organization with the Arc of Indianapolis and Marriott hotels, and they built a hotel from the ground up, which is a training school, basically, a teaching hotel for people with developmental disabilities. They go and they're trained in the hospitality industry, and they leave there, I think it's a 3-year program, they leave with knowledge and experience in hospitality work and can get work. They can get real work. So that this is, not as quite as huge a scale as the Rising Tide Carwash, because it didn't take much of his own money. What was big about this was partnering with these organizations, partnering with an ARC, which I imagine is a lot easier to do than partnering with a Marriott. But it's about looking around and asking. This is something maybe we could do. Made by Brad. This is a dad and his son Brad. The dad figured out that Brad was obsessed with Legos. He could put together Legos with his eyes closed. Maybe not. But any Lego pattern, there it was. But Brad needed work. His dad came up with the idea that Brad would put together IKEA furniture. So he created Made by Brad, put a video out about it, and it went viral. Because who does not want to have someone put together their IKEA furniture? And it was perfect for Brad. Again, he could go in, not talk to people, put the stuff together. And really not a whole lot of overhead. Scott is an example of a young adult, young guy, he's a friend of mine, who by day, he works at an ARC, and he gets to be an advocate and earn a paycheck. But his real thing, his deep down thing, is that he's a poet. So he makes sure that he has time in his life for his poetry. So aside from working, and he has autism, he's got significant speech challenges. But aside from getting his paycheck, he writes his poetry and he promotes his poetry. And he got to a point where he got to speak at our State House for Autism Awareness Day and read a poem. And so this is a guy who really figured out what was important to him in his life, how to work and how to play or create, in his case. Pete's Petstones. This is one of the guys who lives on that farm that I showed you before. So Pete was obsessed with cement and animals. And he and one of his caregivers came up with the idea of creating a pet gravestone company. So Pete makes headstones for pets' graves. And I mean, I just think that's fabulous. That's brilliant. There you go. And he has a website, and I don't know if he can, I know he doesn't earn tons of money, but he earns definite pocket money. But that isn't what it's about, obviously. He has found a way to go from being a person who stims about animals and cement to a person who creates a product that many people care about. I already mentioned Shri, our friend who worked in a hospital nearby and now works there again as an adult. To be honest, I don't know if he likes that job as much as his parents do, because he wears a coat and tie to work, and they feel very proud. I feel like Shri's doing great things, but I need to help parents let go a little bit, but, okay, that's just between you and me. Stefano is another young man who became really obsessed with the duck tours. Now, I don't know if you have that here, because there's no ocean, but you have lakes, or, well, okay, great. So you know what they are. I'm sorry. With the duck tours, as you know, there's like this spiel about, you know, the history of this place that we're going through, blah, blah, blah. Well, Stefano was really into that whole thing and memorized it in only that way that autistic people can. He memorized those speeches, and he could tell you anything about anywhere on the duck tours. They didn't hire him for a job, which makes me mad, but that's where we are right now in society. We've got to keep pushing to get to the point where our guys will be hired instead of just treated as this special employee. You know, I feel like even if Stefano is unpredictable sometimes, he'd probably be their most winning, wonderful duck tour person. But they don't know that yet. Right now, what he does is he does a blog for them. And that gets a lot of that itch scratched for him. He can do that. But I want us to keep pushing, because that's not enough. But it's great. Okay. This is actually, this slide is already old. I'm sorry. I'm not looking for the bakery thing anymore for Nat. He's in a day program. I got an idea a few months ago that we would try to create some kind of small bakery, because one of his friends is the daughter of someone who owns a really good cake bakery in town. And I thought, what if we could partner? What if Nat's day program could partner with them? I'm only using this as an example of how these things start. All of these things start with just someone thinking, hey, wait a minute, that's not rocket science. It just takes an oven, and a little bit of space, and someone who can keep people focused and on task. So I got very excited about that, but then I realized it was all about the fact that I liked that bakery so much, and I wanted a connection, but because Nat is very happy where he is, so I don't. But it's a good idea. So one of my biggest points is that social life, obviously, that's the thing. What happens after work? Because so many of us don't get to have the job of our dreams. We have a job, or we have something we do during the day. But what is that other thing that makes us who we are? And that's the same for people on the spectrum, adults on the spectrum. 10 minutes left. That means I have 10 minutes till before? Okay, great. Oh, I think I'm doing very well. So to me, it's all about the social life. It's very, what I'm saying is it's very hard for us to always just be able to do that work that we imagine we'd be doing. And even if you went to medical school, became a doctor, and you always wanted to be a doctor, that's probably still not the thing that you really want to do when you have time. So I was thinking about that for our guys. And where do you find social things? That can be very hard for people for whom social skills isn't the first thing they can do really easily. I have here Minecraft represented, because Minecraft is just one of these examples a lot of people know about. There's organizations that offer Minecraft groups, where you get together and just, you know what I'm talking about, you just play Minecraft together. My middle son pointed out to me that actually these guys are the Minecraft developers. It's a picture I pirated from Google, and he said, but they probably are. Some of them might be on the spectrum. Good guess, right? adaptive sports that's everywhere now, not just Special Olympics. There's the surfers healing people. You know, you can go to one of their camps for a week if you have the resources, but there's so many other kinds of camps these days. I know Easter Seals has some wonderful camps and ways of kind of getting these needs met, even if it's just 1 week a year. It's a start. This picture of Nat on the horseback, that's one of the camps I've sent him to. It's a camp in Colorado that is just for people with autism. It's called Ascendigo. And sending him to that camp was really an amazing thing. This is when he first went when he was 17, because he learned to sleep away from home, which is a really good skill. So it was even more than, it was about more than just riding a horse or rock climbing. It was also that he was able to get his needs met away from home. And my favorite example of all is MUSE, which stands for Music, Unity, and Social Expansion. This is a group started by a special ed teacher in our town, who's also a classical violinist. She started teaching people violin, people on the spectrum, that she knew from being a teacher. Eventually, they had a concert, other families joined, and now it's a nonprofit. My son is now a part of it, started out on just on some rhythm, and now he's a singer. Oops. So wait. So now starting to wrap it up. Cultivating, finding your peeps, as I said. The number one place to find them, other autistics, often on the internet. Service providers, libraries. You can find partnerships, and you can find the information you need from the people in these places. Artists and musicians really make good people, open-minded people that your guy might want to hang out with. I mean, there's all kinds of partnerships out there if you think about it. It isn't just this one organization to another, it's where can I find a kindred spirit? And I found that college and grad students, artists and musicians, these are the kind of people that are just, they're used to being more on the margins of everything. They're less mainstream, and they're good people to kind of hang out with your guy. And so, dream and ask. I should also put in observe, okay? But dream is really big, because you really need to be able to stay focused and keep your eye on your guy and his life and the life that he deserves to have. Not just maintained, not just a life where he's maintained, but a life where he's happy and growing, because growth really occurs anytime in life. There is no 0 to 5 window. It just keeps happening, and often I think especially with people who have atypical development, you never know when growth is going to happen. So you have to keep moving that dream ahead, and you have to not be afraid then to push and to ask people. What we still need, this is what Russ was saying before, we need all kinds of advocacy. We need our guys to register to vote. My son voted in the presidential election. It didn't help. But all of these are still on the horizon, and the way to get at it is to keep our guys out there, out in the public face. Keep going. That this is my favorite picture. I will quickly tell you he's a rock star now. There he is singing. This is a guy who does not have a real long conversation ability, but he can sing all of Sweet Caroline. He goes with us to these Renaissance fairs. It's really what I like, but he does it too. He works now at an Audubon Society. And this, the best one of all, he spoke at Autism Awareness Day at our State House. I helped him write a speech about his living situation just by asking him, like, okay, where do you live? And he answers, and I said, type that. So it was really written by him. You could not hear him, except for the one time where I said, louder! And then he shouted one word, and then went back to So I passed the speech out to everyone. And there's our governor clapping for him. And this is true, but the better way to say it is the way my husband says it, which is declare victory, then get the hell out. And then that's just me. If you have questions, or which actually we can do now, I think I have time, but thank you for listening.
So if you have questions in the audience, if you want to raise your hand, one of us will try to come around with a microphone. Mary. And if you have written questions, we'll pick those up as well. I carry my own mic with me, so I'm okay. So I'll take cards if anyone has cards they want.
Hi. Hello.
Hi.
I really don't have a question, just really wanted to commend you. Being an autistic adult myself, there were a lot of things that you shared that I think are really important points for people to think about in terms of people having a sense of autonomy, doing things that are meaningful to you, how foolish and ridiculous that functioning labels are. Everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And so I think mentioning these things and the importance of thinking outside the box and how that helps to foster a successful life in the way that a person defines success for themselves and not necessarily society's definition of success. I think those were really key and important things. And your son sounds amazing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I'm also an adult on the spectrum, and a few of your points really hit home to me. The importance of the individual doing what really interests them versus what interests the parents. I think that's really important, and I mean, you kind of admitted it. You know, you wanted him to do the bakery, but that was your agenda, you know? And so when you recognize that, that's really healthy. And also your comment about that other individual with the duck tour, that's really, that brings up a larger issue of, you know, providing meaningful employment to foster independence instead of it being more like a token public relations campaign to make that organization look good, but it's more surface oriented. And I really liked how you said we have to push, because it's just so true. I mean, if we don't push, we're not gonna move beyond that. So thank you.
Thanks. It's so hard. It really is hard to always be the one that has to push, right? But that's how it happens. But you can't always do it, so sometimes you should just sit back and enjoy.
My question, do you have any suggestions what libraries can do to, number one, get started, and to advocate and encourage the community, and also specific programs that might possibly work?
I guess I would like to be sure that libraries have, you know, first of all, like a whole lot of books, you know, written by autistic people, written by their caregivers, personal experiences and how to, you know, there's so much out there that I know, because I really had to work hard to market this one, but there's really a lot out there that's really terrific. So you have to have the books. Also partnering with service providers, I think. partnering with schools so that you know what needs to happen in the timeline of a student and an adult, and that the school knows that they can send people to you. I think that the connections between the institutions that we have are really important, and library's one of them. So there's the service providers and the state agencies, the doctor's offices, and the schools just all need to be talking to each other. And I feel like that's how it starts. That's how you get to know what's needed.
Hi, I'm Holly from Skokie Library, and actually, I'm almost putting words into my coworker Dawn's mouth. I'm asking the question that hopefully I can support her in her work with the vocational volunteer program at Skokie. We keep talking about how to get the businesses in our community involved in internships for those in the vocational program. It seems a lot of the agencies and schools come to the library thinking that's the first place. They can clean things, they can shelve things, and we want to think bigger. And having learned from you just now the importance of and we do try to match skills with jobs, but thinking deeper now on passions with jobs, would you recommend still a general vocational volunteer program across the community so that transition students could experience many different assignments and find the one that maybe they like best? Or would you recommend looking at as an individual approach, so working with the schools for each student and then approaching a business with something that might be a good fit for that student?
I mean, I guess, can I say both? I mean, I really do think you need to have voc ed in the curriculum for everyone. There shouldn't be like this division, you know, okay, you're not gonna be academic, so you do vocational, or you're going to college, you don't need that. You really absolutely need a general vocational curriculum, like you were saying. And within that, life skills for everyone. You don't know how many young adults I know don't even know how to address an envelope, and that's my middle son, you know, who doesn't have a diagnosis, although you could make an argument. But I think that the private, the individualized is also really important, and so there have to be, you know, maybe if the libraries are the first place you go, the libraries can also maybe do some work making connections with community leaders who depend on them for using their space or whatever. I mean, the library heads know the Rotary Club, and they know people in town, and it kind of happens on that smaller level. You do need to have the individualized options. Sometimes our guys don't know yet what they want to pursue, so having the choice is good. We made the choices for my son back then when he was being trained in his in vocational, and at first it was all food, flowers, and filth. That's how what they called it. Those were the job categories. But there really can be more, I think. But it is really about trying to figure out what that guy wants to do.
Come on.
I did some work with the United Nations, which you'll hear about tomorrow, about serving people with disabilities. And one of the underlying controversies that came up in talking about programs for people with disabilities was whether or not programs like Goodwill are good for people on the spectrum. Their argument was this segregates them. They need to have real jobs with real money to really function in the world. And that seemed to me to be a very narrow position, but I'm wondering what you think about, if you've heard about this controversy and what you think about it.
Oh yeah, I definitely know what you mean. That's like at the beginning, but I feel like I live that, you know, in a way, like that there's so much discussion about shouldn't it be, it should be the individual's choice how they want to live, live. Do they want to live in a group home bigger than 5? Maybe they do, but right now the Medicaid people won't allow that because it looks too much like an institution. Should they be able to work, you know, just a group somewhere in a room that looks like a sheltered workshop, you know? And so the answer is no. To me, that's the answer you're hearing, but I don't feel like that's fair. I don't think that it should be applied to everyone. I think we really need choice. We need to definitely make sure we're not going back to institutions and that, you know, we need oversight like that. But I think an institution can't just be arbitrarily defined as more than 5 people living together with the same diagnosis. So I have a lot of opinions about that, but I have heard of that, and I really think we need choice.
Thank you.
I'm speaking as a sibling of an adult with disabilities, not necessarily autism, but I'm a little bit concerned about, and we could have a conference about issues of segregation and community building, but it's really, when it comes down to it, it's the relationships and building relationships with people in your community, and the library, the bank, the faith community, it's part of the stability over time of the institutions in the community are the places where we come back to resources and rekindle. You know, that's where that help us be able to function in society and to contribute to our communities. So do not underestimate your role in the library as a place of belonging and building relationships and making friendships and real friendships with others.
Absolutely.
We have time for one more question.
Yes, I'm on the panel later, so you might hear me talking a little bit about this later. Again, we could have a whole conversation about this, but just one thought for right now. I think families don't always know what's possible for their child, and that there's a strong institutional bias, so that institutions are offered as the first choice. So, well.
Can you say that again so I understand what your main point?
I would argue that families don't always know what's possible, and there's a strong institutional bias. It's shown in the data for HCBS. It's heavily data driven, but the main point is that there's a strong institutional bias. There is a strong bias to go for sheltered work, go for institutionalization as the first choice, as their first go-to.
Right, and that should not be the first choice. Right. I definitely believe in dignity of risk, where you're definitely taking a calculated risk and pushing the person and really trying to support them to the best degree possible, instead of just making it all about liability or something like that. Thanks.
Good.
Am I done though? I like it up here.
Susan, thank you. And Susan's agreed to sign copies of her books. As I mentioned, you all have a copy of her most recent book. During the break or during lunch, I would suggest giving her a little time to eat during lunch, but she has agreed to sign. We're going to